I'm Indra,
And I'm Amanda.
and we'd like to welcome you to The Messy Middle Matters. Hey, Amanda, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Indra?
I'm good. We've got a spicy one today. So I'll ask you a question. Have you ever worked in an organization that was really good at prioritizing their initiatives and then sticking with those priorities?
It's the it's the sticking to them that's usually the issue. But I've worked at places that weren't very good at prioritizing either. But it's usually the stickiness, I would say.
I've worked in a combo of both. And it's really, I don't think the reason we're talking about today is this can take such a toll on your organization when you can't prioritize, or if you do prioritize, you can't stick with those priorities and help that team focus and concentrate. It's such a churn. It's such a churn.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked at places that have had, roadmaps, sure, right?
Okay.
But sometimes they would get reshuffled every other week, or we'd suddenly mark 10 things as P0, priority zero, which means like stop the presses. This must be done. Yeah. And then act surprised when, half of them fell apart because not enough resourcing. Like, I think, every company has their own unique flavors of challenges when it comes to prioritization.
Yeah, and let's be clear, it's not easy. It's not easy.
No.
If we think about our own lives and prioritizing what we do in our own lives, it's really not easy at all. So I don't want to undersell how the challenge that this can be, but we're here to talk about the value of the prioritization and what the downside of it is and what solutions you can implement, whether you're a leader or a member of the team or whatever it might be, to try and drive towards those priorities, get people to stick to those priorities. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, why don't we go through that example of like the P0s, P1s, P2s, because like that's more, I think that's more in the tech realm that I hear the P0s, P1s, P2s, probably an offshoot from what's that? Jira. I bet you the Jira has helped proliferate that kind of standardization, but maybe not.
I think you're right. I think Jira does have an out of the box like P0, like priority field, right? So the P stands for priority. Every company has their own rubric and guidelines around what the different priority numbers mean. But I would say usually P0 is like, something's on fire. This needs to be done. Like, no questions asked, like super, super top priority. P1 is a notch below that. It's like, it's still very important, but it's not an emergency. P2, that's when you start getting fuzzy of just like, yeah, this has business impact, but it might be a more nice to have depending on your scale, right? I've seen P3, P4, PX.
Right. And assuming that these things are well defined and people who look at them understand what they mean. That's a whole nother conversation. But let's assume that we understand what the words aligned with all the P0s, let's say, mean. What the challenge can be is there's often too many things in that top priority. Or even if an organization decides that P0s there's an objectively clear criteria and there's only one in there at a time and everyone agrees to it, then it just bumps things down to the next level with the P1s, P2s, P3s, whatever P you're down to. You start getting it's a law of diminishing returns as you start shoving things down sometimes, or maybe it's not diminishing. Anyway, but it does but I said it was a P1. Like, yeah. That's great, but
that's
I've got
nice.
30 of them. I've got 30 of them and I have 5 engineers. What gives?
Right. And I think it's human nature, right? I think it's, once you understand that this is how the system works, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to mark all of mine as P1 so that I get my stuff done. And then you get into the case of there's 30 P1s. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's the overcorrection because you're going to lose some ground in the negotiation that's going to come down. Like, oh, I'm going to sit like 1 to 2 notches higher than what I really think it is, so that it looks like I gave some ground as they knock me down. Or if I'm really honest about it, colleague B over there, they always take everything because they always put their stuff in P1, and nobody questions whether or not they're really P1s. I'm never going to get my stuff done if I don't put them into a P1 category.
Yeah. And I've worked at organizations, plural, where where if it wasn't P1, it wasn't getting done.
It wasn't getting done. It wasn't getting done.
Like, why even have P2, P3, P4? Like, really? We have P4 when we can't even get all the P1s done? Like, can we just delete all of them? But, there are people who are like, nope, we must hold on to them forever because we need to continue to prioritize. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Let's be honest here.
Oh my gosh, it's making me think of how I use a parking lot in meetings. I'm like, let's go. There are all these parking lots of things we're never going to discuss and never going to talk about, but like it makes people feel good that they're acknowledged. But I think they should be acknowledged. I think that because we don't know where the ideas come from, we don't know what's going to have the greatest value, but we need to have some sort of method for identifying in some sort of rigor. I know that people want to be nimble and agile and adaptable, and that's all well and good. But if you're not clear on where you're going, it's just chaotic. You're not going anywhere. Your team is really, really lost.
Right.
What have you used to help teams prioritize? Have you used anything in particular, or what approaches have you used?
There are a lot of prioritization frameworks, I'll call them, right? I think you and I have have worked at an organization that's used WSGIF, which is work shortest jobs first. I believe that's what it's called.
Yes, I think that's what it was. WSGIF, yeah.
I've used RICE, which is reach, impact, confidence. Forget what the E stands for. There's, the simple 2x2, like impact versus effort matrix. There's
What's your favorite? or your least favorite?
I think my favorite is the impact and effort one because it's simple. There's no acronym to remember what the letters stand for. And it's visual, right? It's just a 2x2, like it's 4 squares, right?
I have WSGIF PTSD, so I totally understand that. Like,
yeah, same.
And it was to be clear. I've got my own prioritization matrix that I've developed in working with complex organizations, which we can talk about in a little bit, right? Because I do love a good methodology that's commonly known and spoken about across the board, because then it comes with some sort of gravitas. But the way that this WSGIF was being used in this particular example, it was so, I felt like we were, forgive the very like direct, I felt like we were praying at the altar of WSGIF, and if WSGIF said so, then WSGIF it would be done. It was just so like insanely black and white that it took away all the humanity from the conversation a little bit. And that I found frustrating. That I found really, really frustrating. And yeah, that was just my experience with it.
Yeah. I think you hit a good point, and one that I was hoping we'd meander to during this episode. All of these frameworks, they come with caveats, right? They come with like the big asterisk, the fine print, the like you said praying at the altar. But like it's not a Bible, right?
It's not.
It is just a framework to help you think about and organize what is important to you. And I think the danger of these frameworks is, well, one, you can hide behind them because you're just like, well, if Wiz just says so, like, okay, that's what we're
game
gonna
any
do.
system, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And like, I think what happens is that a lot of organizations take one of these frameworks or many of these frameworks in an attempt to apply objectivity to something that is subjective.
Ooh.
And like, it doesn't work that way. Yes, there are objective factors, such as like, how much is this going to cost? How many people hours is this going to take? Right. But there's also like sometimes there's the CEO factor of just like the CEO wants it.
100%. I think that it doesn't invite dialogue. Now, you don't want to get into conversation analysis paralysis. Like that's not what I'm encouraging, but I find that you can rally a team behind initiatives much more so when you invite the conversation, clarify for everything why this is important as opposed to I just said so. And they can understand and wrap their heads around it. Then they can churn like in a good way, not the churn as in like thrashing through things and just like looping constantly. They can actually churn out work versus getting stuck in a churn.
Yeah, and I think because what seems to be the goal is an objective, like usually the output of this is a number, right?
It's a number. Yeah.
And then you rank it because, one comes before two. I think the real goal shouldn't be objectivity. It should be, like you said, clarity and transparency about like what is important and why, and inviting that conversation. Another thing that came to mind was the framework is good for consistency, right? Like if we sit down as a group and define what the rules are,
yeah,
of the framework, like what is more important, what's weighted more than what's more important than what, which of these factors matter, does the CEO like trump all, like is that, like, let's talk about that, and then let's be consistent about it.
yeah. And I think that one of the other words I would add to it is alignment, right? One of the things that frustrates me about these very simple, and well, I'll pick on WSGIF. Like it's a fine framework. I know a lot of organizations use it. It's really great in scaled agile. Like I'm not, if you use it, great, and it's working for you, great. But there's only 4 fields, right? How do I get to my understanding of like how big is this thing really? Because I might get my engineering team to figure out how big it is, but how complex and big is it for my design team or my marketing team or my go to market team or my customer support team or my infrastructure team? Like it boils everything down to one number. And I think that when people are using something, I imagine that when people are using something like WSGIF really well, they will do all that analysis getting into that first number, saying like, this is how much effort it takes and this is how big it is. But often the rest of it just gets like brushed to the side, and technology can get through it first, but if the team isn't there to support the launch of it and market and whatever else, who cares? Who cares that engineering finished, because no one can support it. So great.
Yeah. Something about that story triggered another thought that we don't have to go too far down.
Yeah.
But it's finding the right balance between the prioritization exercise and the actually doing the thing. Because you said a lot of things there where like you have to get engineering's input, you have to get design's input, you have to get like the input of every organization within your organization. How much time does that take?
It does. It does. And you need to be really smart about it. You need to be really smart about it, because sometimes it doesn't matter, but you need to at least gut check stuff. At the very least, you need to gut check stuff and say, because like when I worked at TD Ameritrade as an example, like we would always make sure that frontline support was ready to support it. Like how many launches do you have coming from different places, and can we fit this on this day? Because we knew that with every launch, there was an influx of calls from customers every single time. Like that's just the cost of doing business. And just at the very least, having that gut check. Maybe we don't. So sorry, folks. So for some reason, my buzzer is going off on my door, so we'll ignore that sound. But, um, but you need to at least check to see if they can do it. Maybe you don't ask them for a sizing. Maybe you get a T-shirt that say like, "How worried are you about us going out live on this day?" You don't need to go completely exhaustive. They've done this before, so
yeah. You said T-shirt sizing. I can't believe I forgot I forgot T-shirt sizing. That actually might be my favorite one. Just like,
so let's talk about T-shirt sizing. I think most people who are listening to this probably know it, but T-shirt sizing, you generally agree on, what's a small, a medium, large, extra large, and then if you can't even scope it as an extra large, you're like, that's done. Like, so small might be like 1 to 3 days of work, medium might be like 1 to 2 weeks of work, and then you figure it out from there. You create your own, criteria for what each size represents.
Right. And it doesn't have to be time bound either, right?
No,
It
no.
can be it can be like, no, this is by default at least a medium because it involves more than 2 teams.
And that can be the case too. Complexity has to play into it. But I also like something that you said. So I picked up this practice like many, 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 many moons ago when I was at Razorfish. Like we had clients. So I was on the agency side working with lots of really high power clients. We were a relatively expensive agency. So our clients tended to be on the larger size with all the trappings that come from that. And getting multiple departments to align, multiple stakeholders within not your organization to align on what you agency are doing is not easy. And so what I learned there from Dominic, which was wonderful, Dominic Venuto, was the creation. Like I had a spreadsheet where like each stakeholder gets to have. He had a really fancy system that he had, but I just created a spreadsheet. Like each stakeholder gets a column. Like what's the high value for it? What's the low value for it? And like, or like there might be 1 or 2 columns. Everyone fills it out. They can't see anyone else's column. They can't touch anyone else's column. And this way, everyone could have a say in what they were doing. If you're familiar with the organization, you've worked there for a while, you can pre-fill and say, hey, I filled these things out for you in this way. And I had the column for executive mandate because we knew that executive mandate trumped all, right? Because that'll happen.
Yeah.
High value client trumps all.
Exactly. Right. And as you were telling that story, I thought each department had to come to the table with like, what's most important for their department? Because I've been in that situation too.
There's that too. That's a different one than I was thinking of. Yeah.
I've been in that situation too, where like during quarterly planning or whatever planning cycle, right? The executive team gets together and they're like, well, this is the most important for marketing. This is the most important for sales. This is the most important for tech. And then all of a sudden you have 8 P0s or P1s, right?
Because each person chose only 1 P0. Exactly. But now you need to rationalize those 8 P0s. Yeah.
Right. And in a lot of cases, that second step doesn't happen.
No. And it puts such a stress on the shared resources or the people who are supporting multiple stakeholders. Like it could be the 2 teams I worked in the most are design and engineering, which tend to serve the entirety of the organization in one way or another. And that's really tough. That's really, really tough to get through. And, it doesn't, that usually I often have not seen that reconciled. Like I was in one organization that had an entire team that was focused on prioritization. Like that was their role, was to break all those ties across a massive portfolio of projects. And there it was, this goes back to your thing about the thing that you said at the top of the episode. We would prioritize. I think that the goal was to prioritize once a week. We usually wound up prioritizing twice a week, the entire portfolio of projects. And when things were running well, that call was really swift. It was just a gut check. And we would only talk about the ones that like came up because there was something that broke, some very important piece of the system that our customers depended on broke, right? But that in itself, like they can't stick to priorities. Even in the best organizations, like reprioritizing every quarter is crazy. Like with each earnings call is crazy. Like you can't get very much done in 3 months.
Yeah, agreed. Yes. And the reprioritization every quarter does not mean stick to the priorities that you decided with this set of information, earlier in the year for the entire year. There's some wiggle room, right? There's some gray area.
You can adapt, sure.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, to to prioritize your list of how many projects every 2 weeks?
It was it was,
or sorry, twice a week is what you said.
It was twice a week, but like I've been in organizations that do it quarterly, and some of them that have done it quarterly, they'll introduce they do a whole brainstorming for each quarter, like each team, like why?
Right. You're starting new like every
Why?
quarter. No,
We didn't
like
finish.
you didn't even finish.
We didn't finish. We
You
didn't
didn't finish the last
finish.
quarter.
We didn't finish. And that's where, yeah, I mean, I've got all these cliches going in my brain, but yeah, no, there's a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of challenges. So, okay, tools and techniques for navigating this, because I think that, as this can apply to any level of the organization, almost any level of the organization, I'd say from mid-career on upwards. Um, Remind people all the time, like the last time we had this discussion, this was the list. Tell me what changed. Put that list up on a screen, print it out in handouts. I don't care what it is. You make sure everyone sees, like, this is where things stood the last time we had this conversation. What changed and why?
And why?
And why? Like, make them use their words. Make them use their words and explain. There can be really good reasons, but it can't be additive. Like, and as you're looking at that list of the priorities, like, this is the one thing we finished. There's 10 things on the list. We finished one, and you introduce 5. Something has to give. Like, everyone can understand that. Like, budgets didn't explode. And even if budgets did explode, it takes at least, and this is like the fastest I've ever seen it, it takes at least 2 months to onboard a person, to find somebody and onboard them, at least. And that's them in the door, not understanding your systems. Like, so it's not like, I'll just throw money at you. Like,
right. Yeah. I've been in those organizations too, where it's just like, oh, well, we need more people to work on this. And then we
we'll
can
just hire them.
and then we can get all of it done. Okay. Hire like crazy.
Or we'll hire an agency. It'll be fine. Like, no, it doesn't, the world
you don't
doesn't
show up
like
on,
that.
yeah. You don't show up on day one immediately having all the context and all the knowledge and all the systems access.
Right. So so have a list, keep a running log of where things are and what changed. Like, that's the basic form of change management. Yes, that is part of the program management, project management craft, but anyone can do that. Anyone from any craft can do, like, these are the things we were working on. This is how people were aligned. This is the stuff they like, and this is the stuff you're introducing. What gives? And like, great, nothing gives. Fantastic. How do I make these things smaller? Right. And but keep on putting it, like, not in a, I told you so, like, here's the list. Like, that's not going to get you any sort of street credit at all. Like, here's the list. I need to understand what gives and what shifts, like, and I'm just going to keep track of this over the course of time to see how much we stay, how consistent we are on stuff, and how consistent we're not. And maybe we'll learn something, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. I think the documentation is a great place to start, of like, here's the list and here's what changed, like it, or like, here's the list, here's the new list, and here's what changed and why.
Right. And sometimes you're going to have to be bold as a leader and say no. The answer is no. Escalate, my friend. Have fun escalating this. I'm ready to, and maybe after the escalation, me and my team and I are going to have to do that. Fine. But escalate. My answer right now is a firm no, because I'm protecting my team, and I don't understand how this is going to displace everything else that we've got going on.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The art of saying no, right? I think leaders have an easier time. I won't say have an easy time, but have an easier time saying no downward, like to their direct reports, because they have authority, right?
Sure.
But it's not always easy to say no to your boss or your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss
or your peers or the people that you've come to see as friends, like, or saying no to yourself, like saying no to your own project, being like, hey, person C introduced a new project and I really see the value of it. And y'all know that, project 1, 2, 3 is is something I've been championing for. I really think it's going to change our organization and it's going to really add to the bottom line. But for this moment, my team's not going to like it, but I will put project 1, 2, 3 on hold let project C go through. So that's a version of saying no to yourself, right? But, say, hey, once we're done with that, I want everyone's assurances, and I'm going to put it in writing that we'll pick up 1, 2, 3 again, right? Like there's ways of saying no and getting out of it and and killing your darlings, like that's one of the,
right.
phrases that gets
For
used
the
all.
greater good, or like to move to advance the goals of the company.
To advance the goals of the company. But like stay consistent with it too. Like as you're doing this negotiation, whether it's a formal documentation process or not, try and document out like what are the like what's how are we measuring value as an organization, right? Is it NPS scores? Is it, revenue? Is it stability of our system? Because if it's down all the time, no one's going to pay for it, even if it's got all the bells and whistles. Like figure out what are the things that your organization holds true.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there were a few common themes during our conversation. And it's like one is stay consistent. Two is documentation, right? Just like have it all in writing so that everyone can react and align and agree, right? Three, I think is and I lost it, but I think it's the prioritization. It's the explain why, the reasoning behind the decision, I think is really important. Because if you like, if I put myself in the shoes of, an individual contributor who isn't privy to any of these prioritization decisions, right? And my priorities, my personal, like on my desk priorities change twice a week, every week. How does that make me feel? And like, I don't get an explanation as to why. And I'm on the brink of burnout.
Yeah. It's, just in case anybody needs a resource on that, because I could talk about it, but there are much more skilled folks out there. Simon Sinek, his books Start with Why. He's got Leaders Eat Last. He's got a whole bunch of different books that are out there, but I'd say Start with Why and Leaders Eat Last. And even if you just watch the TED Talk, I don't remember which book he was doing, which book was supporting the TED Talk that he's done. He's probably done more than one for all I can remember, but he actually lives not too far from me, I believe. But anyway, I'm digressing. Check out those books, check out those videos, and it really goes through why the why matters. It's really how you get your team aligned and on board and get them behind those priorities. Because, if you explain the why, if you stay consistent and you communicate with everyone across your organization, that's how you stick to the priorities or explain why you're really choosing to churn, right? Like, and it's a deliberate choice. Like, hey, we're taking a hard left right now because, COVID hit. A lot of people took a hard left when COVID hit as far as their strategies, because there was a lot of pivoting that was necessary when the world literally changed, seemingly overnight. It was almost overnight, but not quite. But yeah, it was wild. That can happen. That can happen.
I found my train of thought again.
Oh, good.
So it was the explaining why. And if you have to, use a prioritization framework as a tool, not a crutch, not something to hide behind, but a tool to help you explain the why. Like, we as an organization have decided that, customer, like NPS score is what you said, right? Like customer happiness is top priority. This is the most important thing to us. So how do the projects in our portfolio support that goal? And like, how was that weighted in the decision to prioritize project A over project B?
Yeah, I would say you should always have some sort of prioritization methodology. It doesn't have to be like a formal one, but there should be something you're grounded in.
Right. Impact and effort.
There has to be something aligned to core values, aligned to then. Yeah. Anyway, I could go on. I'm going to digress into various different things. Like I've got oh gosh,
OKRs.
Cascading OKRs. We can talk about those one day too, and what has worked and what hasn't worked. But anyway, and strategic goals of organizations. But anyway,
I know OKRs was floating in my brain too, and I was like, nope, not going to say it.
Yeah. So I think prioritization matters. Be consistent in how you prioritize. That probably does use some sort of framework of sorts, whether it's homegrown or like something that's super familiar everywhere else. Communicate things out, be consistent, and resist trying to respond to every shiny object and reprioritizing and sending your team into a tailspin. I think that
Say
incorporated
no.
some of your stuff. Oh, say no. Yeah, you got to learn how to say no. You got to say no. Amanda, yet another rich conversation. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's listening. Hopefully, you got something good out of this. And I hope that you'll all join us next time when we discuss another topic from the messy middle. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for taking time with us in the messy middle. Word of mouth remains the most powerful way for people to find us. If this episode sparked something for you, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, download a few episodes, and share it with someone else who's navigating the in-between. Do you have ideas for future episodes or topics you'd like us to explore? You can find our feedback form at themessymiddlematters.com or in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on this journey. This work is better when we do it together. Until next time.